dancing in my backyard.
Hi everybody, welcome to the inaugural episode of Warhammer Lizardmen. I plan this to be a series where in each episode I'll talk about some aspect, different unit choice in the Warhammer Lizardmen army in the current army list for the Warhammer Fantasy Battles game. Very similar to what I did for the Warhammer Demon series. You might have heard of it, you might have seen it. If not, check it out. I'm also going to take a look at each of the models associated with that particular unit choice and offer up some marginal tactical advice as well, maybe. Starting out, I want to talk about the history of the Warhammer Lizardmen army as I know it. I'm not saying that this is definitive. There might be some chunks that I'm missing. I'm not as up on it as I am the demons. So if I miss something, feel free to post it in the comments. I'm not saying that this is absolute. I'm not saying this is all there is. There might be stuff I'm missing. If it's there, I'm just unaware of it. So my first encounter with them, the Warhammer Lizardmen, was in 1991 in this book called Warhammer Armies. This is a pretty interesting concept. You just needed the rule book and this book and you had everything because all the army lists are right here in this book. So you could read up on your opponents, make sure they're getting all the special rules right, that sort of thing. It was all right in here. So there isn't an entry in here, oddly enough, for Lizardmen, but we do have an entry for an army called the Slan Army. And here we have a picture of their head general, Lord Mazdamundi. Sound familiar? Needless to say, the army, like Lord Mazdamundi, has evolved over the years. Originally, just to show you, it was made up of Slan, which were these frogmen warrior things. Here's a picture of them, brightly colored and all that good stuff there. They predominantly filled up the entire list. There was one entry for Lizardmen. There was an entry for Troglodytes, which bear a striking resemblance to Croxigors. There's also an entry for my favorite unit of all time, lobotomized eunuch human slave warriors. How cool is that to have some of these guys marching around your army, these lobotomized eunuch slaves? So, game doesn't have anything like that nowadays. In some instances, it's obvious where they got things and motivation for units that you still see today. That was for 3rd edition. Then, when the game shifted from 3rd to 4th edition, it was a big paradigm shift, and they had to redo all the army lists to conform to the new rules. So they published, very similar to Ravening Hordes, a Get You By army list. I don't have one of those here with me. It's been over a decade since I've seen one, and I don't... If Lizardmen were in that Get You By book of lists, I totally oblivious to it, so they could have been in there. But the next incarnation of Lizardmen came out in '97 with this army book. Interesting little tidbit is the 5th edition box set, which came out in '96, had Lizardmen in it. You had your Saurus, and then you had your Skinks. And then a few months later, they had this Slan Mage Priest model that came out. But you didn't really have rules to use them, to put them down on the table. The Bretonnians also came out in that box set, and within a few months, I believe it was, they had their army book, and so they were rocking. And if you had these Lizardmen, you're just like, what do I do with these? Okay, I have to take this guy as my general. He has to be here, so I'll get this Slan. But it wasn't until a while later they came along with this book, and it was well worth the wait. The Lizardmen have pretty much stayed very similar from this book on through. A lot of the models that you'll see in the upcoming episodes are from this era, and they're still playable. Maybe there's been some minor weapon swaps, whatnot. There's only been maybe a couple of units that they've added that didn't exist at this period of time. But this was a good list. Then they changed over in Ravening Hordes. So 2000, you've got your Ravening Hordes Lizardmen army list. It was fairly short-lived. Then in 2001, they came out with the list in the 2002 annual, but it was actually originally published in 2001 and compiled in 2002, and they put it out. This added marks of the gods, kind of like chaos marks. These would later become the different spawnings that you had available to you. And then we also see then appearing for the first time the new unit here. Let me just check one fact here. Yeah, you've added then the Chameleon Skinks make their first appearance in this list. decent list. Like I said, they pretty much have the same unit choices. Maybe something will slip from special to rare, or vice versa, or from core to special. Then in 2003, book that many of you Lizardmen players are probably familiar with, they have this Lizardmen book, and it came out, and it was, I mean, 6-year run this book had. There's these different sacred spawnings, and for the first time you see the role of the Slann Mage Priest somewhat relegated to more of just a wizard, completely non-fighting character. Prior to this, the model was borne aloft by some Temple Guard warriors on his palanquin, and you can't even really see that from the art. But now they move to, he's levitating himself around through his own mental prowess, and he only has one attack, and that's just from a skink attendant. I'll probably get into more of this in the episode on the Slann, which will be coming up shortly. And so he used to be like a really good fighting character and a wizard to boot, and they've moved away from that here. And then they added the option to have a Saurus Lord, which previously you didn't have. You had to have a Slann Lord if you wanted to bring a Lord. And this is a good. They've got the sacred spawnings, which were pretty novel. When the new book came out in 2009, I thought, well, we're going to lose the sacred spawnings. I didn't know how I felt about it. I wasn't. But then when I thought about it, there was only 1 or 2 of them I ever really took, and one of them was for an armor save, which they added into the Saurus anyway. Did have a lot of good magic items and stuff in it. A lot of neat combinations here. Trying to think of what they might have added really new in this book. And oh, they switched the cavalry. Had previously been skinks on Cold Ones. With this edition here, they switched it to being Saurus on Cold Ones. To me, I think thematically, skinks on the backs of the make more sense than the Saurus, but I'm not a designer. Then there was I'm going to skip over a little bit here. There was the 2004 compendium had a great like lizards list with just stegodons and salamanders and swarms. Nothing ridden by anybody, just the monsters themselves. And then there was the Lustria book that added some specialized lists in. One of them, or a couple of them maybe featured Lizardmen. I didn't really pay too much attention to that. But that brings us to this book. It just came out in January this year. This is the book that is going to be the prime focus of the Warhammer Lizardmen. In fact, anytime you hear me talking about Lizardmen Army or Lizardmen Army book, it's going from here on out, it's going to be about this. I just wanted to go over the other ones in the history, and I'll be getting into how this book has changed, how you think about it. I like it. Normally I'm resistant to change. I fear change. I'm older. I'm getting set in my ways, but I like what they did with this book, and hopefully my enthusiasm for it will carry through into future episodes. So thanks for watching.